All right, we're live. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows. If you like what we're doing, what we started doing again, and would like to help support the show, visit patreon.com/afteractionproject. If you'd like to throw us some free support and appreciation, we would greatly appreciate 5-star reviews on iTunes. And then tonight's episode, just like every episode, is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network. Be sure to check out the other great firearms podcasts on the Firearms Radio Network by visiting firearmsradio.tv. And that freaking introduction is no less redundant this time than it is any other time that we do it. So we appreciate everybody jumping on. Hopefully that didn't come through the audio. But tonight we're joined by Memphis Beech of Top Gun Memphis to discuss Beyond the Permit and Mastering the Pistol. And we're going to talk about all things student instructor related. Memphis, sounds like you enjoy being a student just about as much as you enjoy being an instructor. So before we get a little bit any further into this podcast, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners or viewers? What got you started in the firearms training world? And Andy always asks, I'm going to take your question, Andy. Andy always wants one piece of obscure, like one fun fact or something that most folks wouldn't know about you.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. What got me started in this? Dadgum. How much time is this? Right.
As much as we need it to be.
Yeah. So, oh boy. I'm trying to think of how far I should go back. I think I should probably start from the beginning. Graduated high school and went immediately into the Marine Corps. I think I may have started. I spent one more summer with my pop. He was a general contractor, so we worked on everything: roofing, attics, basement, plumbing, just about everything. And that really helped me out in the Marine Corps because I wasn't infantry. I was avionics. I worked on helicopters. I was an electrician. And so I served for 9 years. I saw a bunch of countries. I went to Afghanistan, Kuwait, Djibouti, Africa, the USS Bataan, saw a bunch of different countries. And so the thing that was kind of interesting about it was that, man, you see people do some jacked up stuff to each other, And so it really made me glad to come back home. The thing is, home wasn't too much better. I lived in Memphis, Tennessee. So anybody that trains with Tom Givens knows what kind of track record that place has. But for anybody that doesn't know, Memphis has a crime rate that's twice that of Chicago and 3 times that of Los Angeles. So, I wasn't home long before, stuff started happening. Like, at first I was thinking, okay, maybe I just live in a bad neighborhood. But there was one night in particular where I heard gunshots outside and they were close. So I didn't know if they were shooting at our house or if there was just a drive-by or what. Come to find out later, I find out that, my next door neighbors were selling drugs out of their house. And you don't live that kind of life long before, violence finds you. And so me living next door, I'm sure something happened there. And I got spooked. I hid under my bed. There I was, hiding under the bed, Beretta in one hand, cell phone in the other. I call 911 and I get a busy signal.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It was surreal, I didn't even get a human being. It was just a recording. It says, hey, just to sum it up, we can't get to your call right now due to high call volume. You're going to have to try again later. And then the line cuts out. I didn't even bother calling back. I just sat there and I prayed. And a couple of times I heard something. I don't know if there was actually anybody inside the house. I think the house just kind of creaks. But there were a couple of times I had to orient my muzzle towards the door to my bedroom. And I was certain that someone was going to kick it in at any moment. And so that was just kind of an awakening for me. Of all the training that I got in the Marine Corps, nothing really prepared me for that. So I sought out training and I just really hadn't stopped. I trained with Tom Givens. I got all the way up to his master instructor class. Um, I trained with Chuck Haggart, his less lethal class. I have certifications with um, the NRA as a chief range safety officer. Um, I'm authorized to teach the CCW curriculum and basic pistol. I'm an instructor with the USCCA. I'm an instructor with the National African American Gun Association. Um, I'm a master class shooter in IDPA in 2 different divisions. I just won the Arkansas State Championship and first place expert in carry optics. Made it to the shoot off at TACCON, and there's probably a couple other things I'm forgetting right there. Um, and so when I came to Top Gun Memphis, I met other guys that I'm gonna be honest, like a lot of those guys, a lot of them are better shooters than me. Like there's one guy there, his name's JD Mungo, and he just picked up his turbo pen. And there's another guy there, his name is Ty Reed. He is an infantry marine, and he's going to USPSA Nationals coming up. So good luck to him.
Tim will be
Um,
there.
oh, that's excellent. And so that's there's a lot of guys there that were back at the mothership. We call the original Rangemaster campus, we call that the mothership. And so a lot of the guys, a lot of our instructors here, they used to teach over there. And so they tell me all their secrets all the time. And so, it's been really rewarding to kind of try to be. I'm getting closer and closer to the instructor that I needed when I needed help, you know? And, that's really one of my goals. Like those guys that are hiding under their bed and they're relying on 911. It's like when by the time we're done, the bad guys aren't going to be the ones that are going to be kicking in doors or anything like that. The bad guys are going to be the ones that are afraid, you know? It's not going to be us that needs 911 to come save them. It's going to be
So,
the bad guys.
Memphis, can you delve a little bit deeper into that? Because that is um, it's a very interesting concept that you're talking about there. Can you go a little bit deeper in that with as far as what you're talking about?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So when I first got started, I mean, I got started the way a lot of people get started right now, which is having to wade through the gunk that is YouTube and Facebook until finally you understand what good instruction looks like. And then once you see it, you actually go get it. Um, like for instance, like there are a lot of guys I know, especially in this area, that would train with certain schools. And I'm not going to bash anybody, okay? I mean, I think that we're all really allies and the Second Amendment and allies and the defensive space. But what happens is there's some folks out there that really haven't updated their database, so to speak, right? And so you hear about this stuff on Facebook and YouTube and these little forums and these groups, and you look at the responses that they have to these comments, and they're getting all the likes, and you wonder how many people are actually being misled.
Mm-hmm.
Like to give you an example, for a long time they were teaching people in the state of Tennessee that if someone tries to break in your house and you use a firearm and they fall outside, then what do? You drag them inside, right? Well, of course that's not going to be correct, and then of course that usually falls on deaf ears, and it's mainly because when folks log on to Facebook and YouTube and stuff like that, they're not looking for. A lot of them aren't looking for instruction; they're looking for validation. They're looking for confirmation for their own
Yeah.
stuff. So what ends up happening there is you almost have to lead the horse to water and hope that they drink it. So as far as 911 goes, right? When you ask people what their plan is, someone breaks in your house right now. What are you going to do? Well, a lot of people just say they call 911, right? So we know better, right? Because even cops will admit they're not going to get there in time. Okay, like they're gonna try their best. They're gonna run all the red lights. They're gonna put on the cherries and berries, but they're not going to make it in time, and they know that.
You know,
It's gonna be up to you.
real quick, just jumping in on that. I took Tom Gibbons, Range Master, also here a couple months ago at Carl Wren's place in Austin, and there was a police officer sitting next to me, and he was kind of my partner throughout the weekend or whatever. And Tom put him on the spot, and he said, "How long have you been with the police department?" And he said, 28 years. And he said, "How many times have you been called out for a felony stop and you made it before the felony was already, or before you could to stop the felony?" And he's like, "Never once, never one time." So just kind of to like follow up in what you were talking about.
We hear the same thing. We have a lot of current and former cops that are instructors, and we have a lot of students. We have a lot of cops that frequent our establishment. No one makes it in time. It's just you're on your own until they get there. And so the guidance that we don't just have this guidance, it's echoed by a lot of other folks as well. And I think it's really just the general consensus in the space. You don't call 911 for them to come and save you. You call 911 to report what happened.
So they can start an investigation.
Absolutely. You don't call 911 until you get the business done. So, I mean, be that what it is for what it's worth. Like if you have, for instance, I'll just clue you in on, I'm going to reveal, it's not really my home defense strategy, but it's one of the scenarios that we have. If we don't have kids yet, but if we're in the bedroom and something happens, a lot of people imagine themselves going through the house and clearing rooms and stuff like that, taking the fight to the enemy. If I don't have anything out there, we're not going to do that. My job is to create a fatal funnel right there for that door that comes into the bedroom. And I train in on that thing with a 12-gauge Winchester. And my wife's job is to grab the cell phone and her gun, get into the closet. And we have a safe word. We have two safe words, but there's one safe word for this situation.
Hey now.
What's the safe word for the other situation? Another situation requires a safe word.
Yeah, that's right. Scenarios. So,
welcome to the After Action Project.
So basically, I'll just say, I mean, it's not really a safe word. It's just, all clear, and it's going to come from my voice. If the police show up and for some reason I can't be there, like for instance, I'm out of the fight, or, if I'm down or something, and the police show up, then, they're going to call her all clear and they're going to come out, they're going to ask her to come out. But if anyone opens up that closet, they're getting ventilated. Okay. So my job is to protect that closet. Now, if you have kids, that's going to change. If we're in the living room, that's going to change. That's stuff we're going to have to think about. But, it just seems like when it comes down to a lot of folks and, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, like, why do people pick up guns? For a lot of folks, it's an emotional decision. Okay. It's not always a negative emotion. Some people just enjoy shooting guns. I love shooting guns. I have a bunch of guns that I'll never use in self-defense. It's just there for stealing cardboard. That's it.
Same here.
But there's some other, like, there'll be times where folks will pick up a gun for defensive purposes, but there's really not a whole lot of thought behind it, and the thought process really kind of starts with something scary happens. They go to the gun store. Sir or ma'am, how can I help you? What can we do for you? Well, I'm looking for a gun. Okay, that's a good start. What do you see yourself doing with this thing? Like, what's the purpose of it? And you can tell when the lights kind of get bright that, oh, there's differences. Okay. Is it for home defense? Is it for self-defense? Is it for, recreation? Is it for competitive use? Is it for camping? Is it for hunting? And so they're like, okay, well, that's a lot. And so you start thinking about, okay, well, like where do you see yourself envisioning with this gun? Do you plan on carrying it? And so here's the trap that a lot of people find themselves in. You ask them, do you plan on carrying this gun? And they don't want to discount it, as an option. They don't want to close the door on it. So they kind of leave it open a little bit and say, well, I might one day. And that's how they get caught defending their homes with a J frame, or, they're trying to figure out how to put a light on a Glock 26 or, something like that. And it's like, they might come back in 3 years later and they've never carried that gun, And so what would probably be best for them is, get something that's made for home defense, tailor-made for that purpose. And then also get something for concealed carry. Typically what ends up happening is, it's almost like buying a safe. If you try to get something for, well, that's kind of a bad analogy, but let's stick with this right here. If you're looking for a gun for home defense and you're also looking for it to fill that same role with concealed carry, we find out that it's kind of a compromise with both, but it never does any one of them really well. It's best to just get one that's tailor-made for that purpose and then get another one for the other purpose. So what are your thoughts on that? What do you guys think?
That's an interesting take on it, because usually it's if you see the gun discussions that are the responses to the, hey, I'm wanting to buy a first gun, it typically goes to concealed carry, right? Because everybody's like, oh, you get a concealed carry gun. And it's like, the reality of it is a smaller percentage of gun owners actually carry their firearm on them every single day than are in their house every single day. So, it's, that take on it, I think there needs to be, that conversation needs to be had more often, right? Because the home defense gun is something completely different than the concealed carry gun. And while you can use your concealed carry gun for home defense, it's for some folks, it's not going to be the optimal home defense gun, right? It's going to be probably a little bit smaller than what they would comfortably shoot, or something that they could shoot better. So I think that's a conversation, because they are two separate roles that those firearms will take on.
Yeah. That role specifically for you may not work for the loved one too. For example, Memphis, you mentioned putting a 12 gauge in. Can your wife shoot a 12 gauge? Now, some can,
No.
mine can. So then it's like, okay, when you're not home, what's her self-defense gun? And usually it's going to revert back to something she's shot, something she's comfortable with. And unless she's a complete gun girl, then it's going to be that concealed carry gun. And so that's kind of the way I look at it. Here in Albuquerque, it's pretty rough here too. So I usually use my concealed carry gun as well, because it's on my nightstand. My wife's is on her nightstand. For me to have a 12 gauge in my room, I'd have to go to the safe, pull that 12 gauge out, load it, set it in my bedroom, get up in the morning, get ready for work, unload that 12 gauge, go put it in the safe every single day. Mm-hmm. And, when we talk about lifestyle changes and convenience, it's not very convenient. I can shoot my handgun pretty good. So it's kind of like, that's my fallback.
Yeah. And there's nuance to that.
For sure. I think the weeds just go as deep as you really want to do it. And I think it's pretty much comes down to, what is the gun that you train with the most and you're comfortable with? And when we talk about new students, the answer is really none, until you can get them into a class like yours, Memphis, that they're actually going to take that time and learn what they need to learn.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's flip it to the class. I want to dig into the Beyond the Permit course, and then also mastering the pistol course that you guys offer at Top Gun. So specifically for the Beyond the Permit course, who is that class designed for? Who's the student? And then after that, just follow up with, what's the minimum required gear? If I'm a Tennessee resident, do I have to have my Tennessee permit? Can I get my Tennessee permit through that course? And then what do I need to show up with in that class?
So those are good questions. So in order to talk a little bit more about those courses, I need to explain a little bit more about how the Tennessee concealed carry permit works. So just a little 30-second snippet on that is that for ever since like 1994, that was the course that you would need to take in order for you to carry a handgun in public. Of course, that changed in July of 2021. And so Tennessee became a concealed carry state. A permitless carry state. So a lot of people call it a constitutional carry state, but the state still dictates where you can and cannot go, where you can, what you can and cannot do. So,
I want to stay on that a little bit, and it'll take us on a little bit of a tangent because there's all this talk about constitutional carry and how it's like the greatest thing since sliced bread for gun owners. And I don't think a lot of people realize that it's not. You get to put a gun on your hip and carry it anywhere and everywhere. In Arizona, for example, there are still places, in Tennessee, it sounds like there are places that you cannot carry your concealed handgun without a concealed carry license. So talk to us about
Absolutely.
and then maybe the pros and cons, the benefits of getting a Tennessee permit, even though it's a permitless carry state.
Yeah. So if you're old enough and you meet all the requirements to purchase a firearm, you can carry it. You can carry it right away. You can carry it out of the store. But there's still a lot of places where you can only go if you have a Tennessee enhanced carry permit. And so, like, I'll give you an example. I can't really sit here and remember exactly all of the examples without the PowerPoint. But the biggest example that I typically use is if you go to a place that serves alcohol, then you can only go in there if you have a permit. Okay. Otherwise, you'd have to leave the gun in your car or leave it at home or something like that. So it would actually be a misdemeanor if you went in there armed without a permit, even if you don't drink. Now, Tennessee states that with an enhanced carry permit, you can go in there and you can eat your meal, have lunch, dinner, whatever, but you still can't drink. Not while you carry. So, but that's just one example. Okay. But yeah, the Tennessee handgun carry permit, the biggest reason to get one, even though you could still carry in a lot of places, you can still do probably 90% of all the stuff that you can do without a permit. But the main reason is going to be reciprocity. So if you leave the state and you go into other states that do require a permit, we have 36 states right now that see the Tennessee handgun enhanced carry permit as their own. And they may or may not allow you to carry without a permit. You're just going to have to know before you go. Now, those requirements, the reason why it has that reciprocity is because of the requirements by the state. There's 8 hours of instruction. There's a live fire portion. You have to pass a qualification by 70%. Requires 50 rounds. And that meets the same requirements that a lot of these others have, that a lot of these other states have. And that's why we have reciprocity. The thing is, it doesn't tell you everything. And it's heavily audited. A lot of states will, let's compare it to Mississippi, for instance, right? Mississippi allows their instructors to create a curriculum that they see fit. And if anything happens with that student, then they're going to question that instructor about, okay, what did you teach? How consistently do you teach it? Do you have any documentation about what you taught? Tennessee, what they do is they give you a PowerPoint and they give you a course of fire, and the PowerPoint and the course of fire cannot be altered. So we have to teach to that curriculum. And even if no one in that class has any revolvers, like they're not going to shoot any revolvers, they don't have any interest in revolvers, we still have 12 to 15 slides that I have to covering revolvers, including which way they revolve. And it's
really,
yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. Yeah,
that's not something that I think your average concealed carry person that's going to use a firearm in self-defense needs to know. That Smith & Wesson rolls this way and Ruger rolls that way.
Yeah, well, there's a trick to it. The trick to it is you rob Peter to pay Paul. And so the main 3 things that I want folks to get away from these classes is, number 1, you got to know the safety rules. You got to understand the safety rules on and off the range, the rules for life, the word, the universal. The second thing is teaching them about of handgun use, that you can only use these handguns to defend human life, not property, not your dog. Man, it hurts to say that, but that's the law. And the state of Tennessee is not going to protect you if you do that. And of course, the third thing really is where you can and cannot go and what you can and cannot do. Okay, and that's really the biggest takeaways that we take away from that. Everything else, I don't want to say it gets skimmed over. We pay it lip service where it's due, but I'm talking we try to minimize the amount of time that we use on that. especially if it doesn't pertain to the students that are in the class. You really kind of have to manage the students that are there. And really for two reasons. Number one, some students are just there for the piece of paper. They don't care what you have to say. They just want that piece of paper so that they can carry. I just want to carry my gun. Okay, cool. The second thing is you have a lot of people in the class that are taking a permit class, but they have no intentions of actually carrying a permit.
Why do you think that is, Memphis?
I talked to a couple of those folks, and what they told me was that, well, when they talked to their uncle, father, cousin, brother, whoever, and they said, hey, I want to learn more about guns, they said, oh, well, just take the permit class. That's what I did. Well, back in like 2003, when they took it, they didn't have things like private lessons or welcome to your handgun or intro to marksmanship. Everybody got into this thing by just taking the permit class. And the general assumption is that, well, if it was important, why didn't you put it in the permit class? Well, it's just, if I did that, it'd be 3 weeks long and everybody would fail. So that's the permit class, right? And it's very, very rudimentary and it's very elementary. But what we do is we try to use that as an opportunity to kind of open up the gateway for these folks, you know? And so for a lot of folks, this is going to be the first time they ever even touched a gun, like much less fired one or, you know, talked about the morality of gun ownership and self-defense. So this will be the first time. There are guys that have been shooting for 30 years, and this will be the first time they ever hear about the safety rules. So that's our opportunity. I don't want to say to hook them, but to really kind of let them know that there's levels to this thing. Okay. And This is level one. So the next level would be beyond the permit. And
hey, real quick, Memphis, how many hours requirement is Tennessee's concealed carry course?
It's 8 hours.
8 hours. Is that what you guys typically do within the 8 hours, or are you allowed to go more if necessary?
We try not to go for further. It's not really a state requirement. Like if it just so happens to take 10 hours, so be it. But we try not to because everybody's winded, you know, it ends up being a painful experience for everybody involved. If that's their only experience with training and they think that, you know, by the time they're done, we got out 2 hours late and I'm famished and I missed dinner and, you know, I got to pay the babysitter. Yeah, they're not going to come back and train. So it's important to get them out on time.
Gotcha. In New Mexico, we're 15 hours minimum training, so it's a two jam-packed days, and it's ironically, you know, Jeremy and I teach this, and we feel like every weekend it's like, man, there was so much more we wanted to say, but then you also understand like there's only so much these students are going to retain, so we stay within our 15 hours. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. You know, how much more can you learn? And in 2 days, it gets exhausting. You see the people just pretty much dead on day 2. They're like wanting to get the heck out of there. So I can see that. So 8 hours.
Sorry, on that, Andy. I think the benefit that we have in New Mexico with it being a 2-day course, the 15-hour requirement, is that it allows our concealed carry course to be like an introduction shooting course, where in most states, like in Tennessee, with 8 hours, it's not a shooting course, it's a permit course. How to keep you out of jail, how to keep you out of the morgue, right? 8 hours is where you can and can't carry, the firearm safety rules, and touch on a little bit of the shooting stuff, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but with us having to spend another 15 hour or another 8 hours in class and on the range, it allows us to do like a 1-day introduction to handgun course or introduction to defensive handgun course for our students, which, you know, a lot of people scoff at the 15-hour requirement, but I think it allows everybody that's going through a concealed carry course in the state of New Mexico, they have an opportunity, if they're training with a reputable instructor, to get the stuff that'll keep you out of the jail and the stuff that'll help you use your gun effectively should you ever need to. Justin Gray said he had a question. Justin, go ahead and ask those questions whenever you want. We'll get to them in the comments. And then, sorry, I cut Andy off. And then Memphis, I don't know if you wanted to touch on that.
Go ahead and touch on that. He covered it kind of exactly what I was going to say.
So what did I leave off? I think it was the beyond the permit. So beyond the permit is, to steal a phrase from Akil Kadir and Tiffany Johnson, we consider the permit class as gateway instruction. And everything past that, well, I haven't really heard Ak and Tiff say it like this, but we've always been calling it, well, it hasn't really been a we thing. It's more of a me thing, but I call it breakout instruction, because that's where you start finally seeing students that are a lot more invested in their own self-defense, and they start to break out of the beginner stuff and get into the higher echelons. That's where we answer questions like, what guns do you want to avoid? What guns are reputable? Okay. Like, what's the difference between a Glock and a Taurus? What kind of ammo should I carry on my gun? Where on the body should I aim for? Like, what part of the body, what part of the anatomy and physiology would be good to hit? What kind of holster should I buy? How many magazines should I carry? Just other questions like that we bake into the PowerPoint. And then when we get on the range, we start dialing in a little bit more on marksmanship, and we start working with drawing from the holster. Now, the original Beyond the Permit, it was originally called Essential Pistol, and it was 16 hours. And so what we found with the Memphis crowd is that they're not going to sit there and pay for Saturday and Sunday and then pay all the money that it would cost. It probably cost like $700 or $800. It probably require, maybe 600 or 800 rounds of ammo. Most people aren't going to buy in for that. What we do is we split it up into 4 classes. We call it 1 through 4, Beyond the Permit 1, all the way to Beyond the Permit 4. And we on the range, we cover just about everything from drawing from the holster and getting draw the first shot and getting that safe and getting it consistent. And then working with other things such as moving and shooting, using walls and barricades as cover, reloads, fixing malfunctions. And we culminate the whole thing with the FBI pistol qualification, because for obvious reasons, it's court defensible, it's nationally recognized, and so it's a great capstone for a curriculum that's pretty well rounded. Now, mastering a pistol ends up going a little bit step further. We start incorporating speed. When it comes to Beyond the Permit, we're still operating at the speed of assessment. Okay, like I'm talking. Bang, bang, bang. Is he down? Bang, is he down? Bang, is he down? Okay, he's down. With mastering the pistol, we're pushing past that so that if we have to dial it back, then the time interval between bang and is he down, that ends up being shorter and shorter and shorter if you can get those skills, if you can base up those skills. It's not really codified, but the general theory is that if you have student A and he has a bill drill of 2 seconds from the holster concealed, and you have student B and his bill drill is 3.5 seconds, student A is going to probably do better in that situation than student B. It's not really based around bill drills and split times and stuff like that, but it allows someone to where, okay, if you have the bones for all this stuff, how do you get better? How do you really approach mastery? And that's really where we lay down that foundation there.
It's interesting that you highlighted that point. If there's a student that shoots a bill drill in 2 seconds and another student that shoots it in 3.5, because I've seen folks and instructors, a couple reputable instructors get kind of wrapped around the tree about that, and it's like, well, there's the no timer in a gunfight crowd, and then there's the yes, there is crowd, right? There's the crowd that's right. Yes, there is a timer in the gunfight. Yeah. It's just
there's a timer. You don't know the part time.
It's a bang, not a beep.
The timer in a gunfight is boom.
Yeah.
Which end of the boom are you on?
Yeah, exactly. I want to be the one that gets it off first. I think that I don't know how that gets missed in the training community. And I think I don't know. This is just me kind of speculating, but I think it's like the defensive shooters versus the USPSA shooters and the competition shooters, right? And it's like, well, you guys are shooting faster than you can think and faster than you can assess. But for me, it's like, well, the student that can get the gun, or the person that can get the gun out of the holster into the fight and get a meaningful shot on target faster, under what circumstances is that not a good thing? So it's I don't know, it's just one of those things. I'm always scratching my head. I'm like, are we talking about students don't need to be faster once they get to a certain point? So I don't want to get off of that topic. What do you think a minimum, or is there a minimum skill set for a student for the Beyond the Permit course? And then what are you looking for as far as like a minimum skill set, if there is one, for the Mastering the Pistol course? Is there some certain standards that I should have before I attend either of those courses?
So before you attend Beyond the Permit 1, let's see. The bare minimum is have some kind of gateway instruction, such as, the Tennessee handgun carry permit, or, intro to marksmanship, or at least a private lesson, some kind of intro. Because if we have to go all the way, like Beyond the Permit isn't really step 1. It's really more like almost step 2.5, kind of, sort of. Just to put things into perspective there. Even the permit class is kind of like a step 2, because imagine taking a driving test, right? Going for your driver's license, having never driven before. Now that would be kind of a challenge, and it is a challenge for a lot of our folks. When folks are coming in for the first time and they say, "Hey, I want to start, doing this thing," maybe think about, the marksmanship class ahead of time. That way you can get some practice in, and you can get an idea of where you're going to be. Now, the Beyond the Permit 1, the minimum requirement, there really is no hard and fast prerequisite. There's a recommendation to take some gateway instruction. Basically, if you buy a ticket, if you buy a seat for Beyond the Permit 1, there's not going to be any checks and balances there to say, "Hey, have you done this, this, and this yet?" We're really just trusting the student to read the description, and if they meet those requirements, then they can sit in the class. If you're drowning, we're not going to sit there and let you drown. We're going to try to get you caught up, but chances are, if this is your first time ever touching a handgun, or if it's absolutely apparent, and we've had to do this, I've had to do this, I think it was last week. What we'll do is we'll call a break. We'll pull you over to the office and we'll say, "Hey, let's reschedule you. Okay. Let's get you signed up for something else, because, it's just, things aren't coming together tonight." I'm not going to blame the student for that. I'm not going to call them lazy or anything like that, but, it's just not coming together, and it's not going to be good if we let you continue. It's just not going to be safe for yourself or anybody else. So bare requirements, bare minimum, I would say have a strong fundamental of the safety rules, and everything else we can work around it. We have holsters that you can borrow. We have guns that you can rent. We sell ammo. You can show up with just the shirt on your back, and as long as you can keep your finger straightened off the trigger and you can keep your muzzle down range, you're probably going to be okay. So as far as mastering the pistol goes, I would say when you show up to mastering the pistol, you need to have your own gun, your own holster. You need to have some idea of, you need to be able to speak intelligently about, how well you've trained and where you've trained. It doesn't even have to be with us. We prefer it to be with us, but if you just show up from somewhere and you've trained with other people, I have a dark pen with Gabe White, or, I went to, Tom Gibbons IDC. Yeah, we're going to let you in. But you need to be safe. You need to keep your finger off the trigger, keep your muzzle down range. You need to know how to draw from the holster. We're still going to review it just to make sure that, for instance, there's some other schools that, they may not exercise a 4-step draw stroke. They might have a 3-step draw stroke, or, they may verbalize it differently, but it needs to be safe. You need to be able to demonstrate to us that it's safe. And basic levels of marksmanship, and we'll be able to work with you.
I like the fact that you guys allow that to where, somebody like one of us, the panel members, for example, we're in Memphis and we say, "Hey, Memphis, we'd like to take that course there." And then it's like, "Oh, sorry, man, you got to take our 1 through 4." And it's like, "Oh, well, I guess never mind." You know what I mean? So I think that's pretty pretty cool. I actually like that because there are a lot of other courses out there that says, hey, if you want to take our Pistol 2 or Pistol 3, you've got to take 1 through 5 to get there. And sometimes that's a turnoff for guys like us, because it's like, man, I don't per se want to go through 3 other courses to get to your advanced class to see what you teach. Not to say it's totally a bad thing, but funds and finances are also an issue. Let me ask you this: so after they get their concealed carry permit, they go through you, they take that concealed carry course, they're 8 hours, and then what is the percentage, would you say, that you have that those people flow over into those other courses? Because the reason why I ask is Jeremy and I, we teach concealed carry, and then we do some defensive pistol stuff, some one-on-one stuff, and the percentage it's pretty small that people continue, just because of that small percentage of people, once they get that concealed carry permit, whether they're checking a box or now, they've gotten this training, and so now they're John Wick and they don't need any more training. So what's that percentage that flows over for you guys?
Oh man. Dadgum. It might be 10%, maybe. 10% is generous. If I had a class of, let's say we maxed out a class, because our range has 2 bays. One bay has 14 lanes, but the other one has 9. And so we usually keep the larger bay for the public, the public range, and we'll save the smaller bay for classes. And, and for that reason, we usually max out our permit classes at 18. We might see maybe 2 or 3 of them again, and that's just going to be it. And it kind of sucks, because here's the thing. You'll even talk to folks after class. Hey, we're going to see you again. Like, what do you have signed up for next? And they'll even tell you, like, hey, I have this thing. We're going to sign up. This was good. We're going to sign up. And they'll look you in the eye. We're going to sign up. All right, cool. Well, life gets busy. They have kids. They have, overtime at work, the car, stuff. And they may have meant well, but, sometimes you may not see them for years. And that sucks. So as far as like, the Beyond the Permit 1 in particular, now once they break out of that gateway instruction and you start seeing them in Beyond the Permit 1, now they're lifers. Like they're bought in, and the best thing for them to do is just try to feed them as much as you can. If they text you you don't really get a whole lot of texts at 2 a.m, right? You don't get a whole lot of texts when it's like inconvenient, but you try to reply back to those texts. You try to, what we have right now is a Facebook group. It's called Top Gun and Golden Triangle Defensive Tactics Alumni, because our director of training, Will Dugan, he made a school down in Golden Triangle. It's called Golden Triangle Defensive Tactics. It's a good name for that. But so those students are allowed to continue their training with us because, Will can vouch for them, and so, it's one of those things where it's almost like a prodigal son, don't want to get preachy or anything like that. Like, you don't get mad at them for staying away. You're just glad that they're back home.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. We have a couple in the years that we have a handful of students that we see them fairly regularly at our additional course offerings, whether it's defensive handgun clinics. But for the most part, everybody, hey, what other training do you have? And then life gets in the way. And they're like, oh, we'll do the next one. We'll do the next one. Mm-hmm. So, it's one of those things, but it's always interesting getting folks that have trained with other students. And we get not quite a few, but we get a handful of those students every month or so now where guys have just stopped training, and, they're reaching out to us and they say, hey, my guy's no longer doing the training deal. So it's good to see some students are getting that training. It'd just be nice if more folks wanted to do that. I want to get to Justin had a question. He said he has a Glock 48 with iron sights that he's comfortable shooting. He put together a PSA dagger with a Vortex Venom 3 MOA. Don't judge his PSA choice. Baller on a budget. He wants to know if it's more advantageous to put the time in for training with the Vortex just to get comfortable with it. And I'm guessing if I'm guessing his question goes to, if I have 5 hours of training that I can do over the course of the next 2 months out on the range practicing or whatever, should I spend that time solely with the dagger, the PSA dagger, or should I split that between the dagger and my iron sights? And what are your thoughts on that, Memphis? We'll start with you.
Yeah, so it depends on what your goals are, and which gun do you see more in your future. There's a reason why you went with the PSA dagger with the Vortex Venom 3 MOA. There's a reason you went for that, whether it be for competitive shooting or you plan on carrying it. Look, we're not going to gun shame anybody. Okay, I have my own opinions about the PSA dagger, and I have opinions about the Vortex Venom. I'm not going to dissuade you from that, and so if that's what you choose to carry, that's fine. We have recommendations, but that's fine. Um, whichever gun you see in the future, I would say that will be where you would put in the more time, whatever your goals are. Um, like for instance, it really just comes down to context. I'll use my friend. Friend is a bad word. He's really my brother. That dude's part of my family. Ty Reed. He's going to be going to USPSA Nationals. Is he going to take his carry gun? No. Like, he's going to carry, yeah, but is he going to compete with his carry gun? No. And so, because his goals are to do well at the match, is he going to put in the majority of his reps with his carry gun or with his competition gun? It's going to be his competition gun, but that context is going to lean heavily towards the background that he has. He's already extremely proficient with what he carries, and so whatever skill he builds with his competitive rig, there's going to be a degree of that, maybe like 70 or 80%, that's going to directly translate over to whatever he's going to carry. So I'm not particularly agnostic to that. Getting training, if you do decide to, there's merits with both of them. Training with your optic is going to make you better with irons, and if irons is the way you want to go with your Glock, and you want to get more reps with that, then I don't think you're gonna lose anything with the PSA dagger. They're very similar. So I would say, here's my advice, Justin. Go with sit down and evaluate what your goals are. Okay, which gun you see yourself carrying more, which gun you like better. And if you're still struggling about, which gun I like better, take it out to the range and put like 50 or 100 rounds through it. And which one are you getting tighter groups with? Which one are you getting, drawing from the holster better with? Which one are you getting, the better performance out of? And that's probably the one that you're going to be okay with. Now, if your goal is to get better with a red dot, and that's why you got the red dot, okay, then do the majority of your reps with the red dot. But before you leave the house, still reps with whatever gun you're going to carry that day. So that would be my recommendation.
Andy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like all that. I agree. I'm not going to shame him on that stuff. So I shot a PSA dagger. One of our friends, Justin, who hosts us, he had one. He put an Apex trigger in it. And I really liked it. Actually, shot really well. So I was actually impressed. I mean, for the cheap price of the gun, I was like, okay, this ain't bad,
Okay. All right. Okay.
Throw an Apex in that thing, dude, and it changes. As far as the Vortex, my first red dot was a Vortex. The number one issue I have with the Vortex, it turns off after 12 hours automatically, and there's nothing you can do about it. So if you draw your gun 2 a.m. and you haven't checked your dot, the dot's off, then you better hope you can run those iron sights as your backup. So that was always my issue with the Vortex. And I always recommend, start somewhere, obviously, and that's where you're at. And then when you feel a little bit more comfortable and you want to upgrade either one of those guns, go to a Holosun. And so, my assumption could be, and I could be wrong here, but I think finances plays into it. A dagger's pretty cheap, a Vortex Venom's pretty cheap, but you're also asking how to be able to defend your life and train, and that's what's the most important part. So I think your next step would be, without finances in mind, get on YouTube videos and start researching multiple dot videos. Sage Dynamics, for example. Tim Herron's got a bunch. Gosh, there's so many guys out there. And start developing you can even take notes off of YouTube and kind of develop some common themes among instructors to where you can kind of get a good idea of what's kind of BS and what's not, and then you can take that to the range, work on that, and then hopefully at some point, get some quality training from one of these instructors that are out there, and then just away you go. That's the way I feel. What you got, Memphis?
So if you could find somebody that puts on a red dot class, yeah, go ahead and do that. Okay. It doesn't even have to be a big name like Scott Jetlinski or like Aaron Cowan. If you could find somebody local and you can see reviews. But
Yeah. No, what I wanted to say was I've got a friend of mine, and this is just a shameless plug. I have no dog in this fight, but I've got a friend of mine in Colorado Springs that teaches a intro all the way up to a more advanced. I think it's 3 courses. It's 3 different weekends. One day, it's 3 different days over 3 different weekends, and it's all about the red dot. And the instructor's name is Colton Miller, and his company is called Miller Defense Institute, MDI. And he's a great instructor. I've taken several of his classes, and he's just one more resource. That he's in Colorado Springs, so we have a lot of friends and family in Colorado Springs from my past and whatnot. So, but yeah, I think that taking just to segue off of what Andy was saying, and as well as Memphis, what is the purpose of your training? Why? What do you want to achieve out of it? And if it's to become better at a red dot, then shove your iron sights aside. We can get to those later. Just focus on the red dot. That's kind of how I was thinking about how to respond to that particular question. Is what's the purpose of it? I mean, what's the reason you're doing this? And find your why, and then go after it.
One last point. Call around to some of your ranges, Justin, and see if you can find a range that'll let you rent. Because if they have any red dots for you to rent, then you can, try before you buy.
Mm-hmm.
Justin's local to us. The range that we have here sucks. The indoor range. They're the only one in this, only indoor
Which
range
one?
in the state. I'm not going to give them the airtime. They are. They have the good old boy mentality. Yeah. The thing that bugs me the most about it, right, is a good friend of mine, a business partner of mine, was in there one day shooting. Bald head, tattoos. He's in the podcast here, right? He went in there, and then a couple other dudes were talking shit as he was walking away. Unbeknownst to them, one of their coworkers is buddies with Andy and was like, "Hey, dude, like these guys were just made some ignorant comments." And that kind of stuff drives me up the wall, because there's this stigma in the 2A community that if you don't look how I'm going to look in 20 years, like the typical middle-aged white guy, right? You get treated like shit when you walk into gun stores, and it's damaging to the Second Amendment. It's ignorant, and those guys, they just. I don't know. But Justin was in my first concealed carry course about 11 years ago in my living room. It's a class I put on for friends and family just to test around the curriculum and all that stuff. And obviously, I was a crappy instructor back then because he went out and put a venom on his freaking gun. Send your Glock 48 to Lone Wolf Distributing. It'll cost you $100. They'll have it milled for the Glock 48, or they'll have it milled for the Holosun. And they'll have it back to you in a week, and then we'll see what about getting you a good price on the Holosun. But in the meantime, like these guys had said, get out there, shoot it, train with it. Andy and we're on the range twice a month, every month. Andy's on the range more because I send him all of the one-on-one students and private students. So we'll definitely get some put some lead down range with you. Cool. So I want to get back to talking about class and training in general. Who is if you had to say, hey, if you're this, how do I word this? What type of student isn't the mastering the pistol course for? Like, who would you say, hey, this class isn't right for you, either at this point in time, or you just have a crappy attitude and don't come train with us at all. But who's the student that you would recommend not to sign up for the mastering the pistol course?
Let's see.
That's hard when you got dollar signs in front of you.
It is hard. Yeah. I'm going to be honest. A lot of folks, if you still have some rough edges, and that's obvious, then, or if you still haven't had a whole lot of, I don't know, I don't want to call it experience, but if you haven't been under the pressure of, like, for instance, so each of our Beyond the Permit courses, there's a final exam at the end. Beyond the Permit 4 is the only final exam that actually has a time element, but you'll be surprised how often you tell somebody, hey, you need to hit an 8-inch circle at 5 yards. There is no time limit. You can take an hour if you want to, and they'll still miss that shot. And the reason they miss is because of the pressure that they put on themselves. So if they haven't felt that pressure, how about we work on some other stuff? Take some private lessons before you make the jump. And there have been times where we've had to turn that money away. Like if it's there are folks where it's like, okay, yeah, you graduated Beyond the Permit 4. Okay, cool. Man, I really recommend you get some practice in and get some face time with one of our instructors before you buy that ticket for mastering the pistol. You know what I mean? Because I'm not going to sit here and tell you you're not ready, because even a squirrel finds a nut every once in a while, right? Even a blind squirrel finds a nut. So, but I'm not going to discount you because I hope you surprise me. But just from what I've seen, you need some work.
Yeah.
And
as a student, I like when you were talking earlier about the courses. It's like, we're not going to let you drown, but we're not going to hold the class back, right? And I like that for two reasons. If I show up for a class that is beyond my skill set, intrinsically, I still keep my money. Let me participate in the class. Do not hold anybody else back because of me, right? Like, and I'm like to think that not every student is like that, but I don't want anybody else. I trained with Tim Herron. I took his practical performance course a couple years ago, and I'm a defensive shooter, right? I shot a couple action pistol matches at the local gun club, right? But I'm a USPSA member, but I'm not a USPSA competitor. So I told him, I said, hey, before, I was like, you better not hold anybody else back. You better not slow class down for me, because that's not what anybody else is paying for. And he has the integrity of an instructor to not allow that to happen. And I held my own. Some things I would do differently now. I ran it with my carry gear, and I was running with the what's the pocket clip for the holsters? The one
Neomag.
Neomag.
I ran it with a Neomag. So the next time I take the class, I'll still probably run it with my carry gun, but I'm going to have a dedicated mag set up so I can actually hit my reloads in a reasonable amount of time. But had it far outpaced my skill set and my ability, I think I would have been able to extract some data and value from that class. But also, if I'm in a class and there's a student that is attending that should not be in that class, I still want to get my money's worth. So I hope the instructor has the integrity to, hey, you can hang out in class if you want. This is what I need you to work on. So that's awesome that's the standard that you guys have. And it's not everybody's going to receive value for it, but the folks that are ready for this class, they're going to receive the most value for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's two scales. Beyond the Permit, if we see you drowning, then what happens is there's an overarching scale that can't be compromised, which is safety. Okay. If you're having trouble keeping the holster, if you're having trouble keeping the gun down range, keeping the finger off the trigger, if you're handling your gun behind the firing line, if you're constantly having to be reminded about the safety rules, then what we're going to do is we're going to pull you back and we're going to say, hey, it's not working today. Okay. That can't be compromised in either one of the curriculums. But in Beyond the Permit, in the Beyond the Permit classes, if we see that you're falling behind, and that's evident in a very reasonable time frame, the person last week, I'm talking like in the first half an hour, and it was going to compromise the entire class. So it was like, okay, well, let's just go ahead and pull her off the line and let's reschedule her. Okay, we'll call a 5-minute break, and then we'll follow up. Now, and that gets very apparent. But if If you get into the class and the only reason you're falling behind is because your skill set might not be up there, and it's not because I'm talking, just to give it a little bit more context, what was going on was there were some safety issues. I kept having to remind her to keep her finger off the trigger. And I've had to talk to her several times about that. And it got to the point where it was like, okay, one more time or we're going to have to dismiss her. Finally, it got to the point where I was like, okay, everybody trigger finger straight, pick up your pistol from the bench and make sure you clear the gun, pull back the slide, lock it in place, visually and physically inspect the chamber and the magazine well. And she looks at me and she says, hey, there's this orange thing inside my magazine well. There's this orange thing inside my gun. And I look at it and it's the follower of her magazine. And she couldn't recognize that. And I was like, okay, let's call a break. Let her know, hey, let's get you some FaceTime with a private lesson, or let's get you in, beyond the, not really so much beyond the permit, but let's get you in intro to marksmanship or welcome to your handgun. That's going to be a better place for you. This right here is just a little out of your depth. So, and I think that pulling her aside and being honest with her about it, being straightforward and letting her know, hey, we don't want you to go away. We don't want you to, this isn't a failure, okay? You didn't fail, you just didn't pass yet. So how about we're not retreating, we're just attacking it from a different direction, all right? And so we're not going to leave you behind. Now, if there was a person in mastering the pistol, it's not really so much, I'm not going to call it letting them drown, but I'm just going to let them know where they lie in comparison with the rest of the class. Our very, very first mastering the pistol class, we had 18 students and only 6 of them passed. Now, it wasn't because they weren't ready for it at the beginning of the class, because a lot of them weren't, but that wasn't why they failed. The reason why a lot of them failed was because they weren't receptive of the teaching. They saw it more as I want to win this class instead of I want to learn the lessons that are there to be learned, or I want to improve, or I want to build up on the skill set. And our goal isn't really to deliver the curriculum and you have to meet our standard. No, the goal is, and the purpose for any class is, we have a lot of people that have common goals. And so let's reach these goals together, and they didn't come in with any goals. They came in with, looking to confirm what they already thought they knew. And, there was one guy in particular. He was like, hey, I've been shooting for 30 years and this is my first class. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Like, this is your first class, your very, very first class. And you decided on mastering the pistol. And it's like, yeah, I've been shooting for 30 years. Okay. So when you look at that target and you see the placement that you have on that target, I need you to be able to put that in relation to the 30 years that you've had. And I want this to be not really just another day in those 30 years. I want it to be like the first day of the rest of your journey. Okay. I want this to be almost like a tentpole moment, and just use this as an opportunity to kind of look back and see, okay, how much progress have I made in that 30 years? And now how much more do I have further to go? Because when I look at your target and then I compare it to all these other guys' target, you know what that says to me, right? And so he knows what that says. And I don't want to say it's part of the reason why he failed the class, but what I do want to say is that there was a lot of learning that occurred there. Now, I'm not gonna let them drown. We're gonna do our best to help these folks achieve their goals. But there is a very important lesson to be learned in failure. You know what I mean? And like, even though you failed a class, I hate even using the term fail, because technically you didn't fail. You just didn't pass yet. You can come back and recertify. Okay? Like, for instance, if that guy walked back in today, well, he wouldn't be able to walk back in today because you have to recertify within 12 months. But if you walk back in like within that 12 months and he said, hey, I want to try this again, he wouldn't have to retake the class again. He would just meet up with one of our instructors, and if he had the time to recertify you, then he would go back through, the final exam. And if he passed it, then he would get the certificate. We keep that certificate. It's printed out. It has, it has the date on it. It's just no one has signed it yet. Okay. And so the reason for that is because we're not giving up on you. We're never going to give up on you. It's another stop on the journey.
Yeah, Andy, Memphis, this is just going to segue off of what you're talking about. Excuse me, what you're talking about. But Andy, what is, I don't have my pro tips in front of me, obviously, but what is Tim Herron's pro tip? It's something like we learn more from our failures, kind of, you know what I'm talking about? It's something like, we learn more from our failures achieved over our successes that you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I don't know it either. I think you did a better job than I did.
basically, Memphis, what he's saying is we learn more from failing than we do from succeeding. And that's totally true in adult education. We learn by doing, we learn by, hands-on experience, especially I'm referring to adults, and we learn by failing. I mean, any class that I teach, I want to push my students until they fail. That is my goal, is to push them until they fail, and then back off 2 steps and then start pushing them again. So, I mean, it's totally, logical that, that what you're saying is people learn by failing. And it hurts sometimes, and sometimes it's embarrassing. And I shot not a USPSA. It was a local match, and if you know anything about the SIG 320 full size, it will take magazines 17 rounds and larger. Well, the 320 compact takes 15 round mags, and I was shooting a 320 full size during this competition. And I had loaded my entire competition belt up with 15 round mags, which means none of them seated into the gun. And it was, Tim Herron was there, Andy was there, there's, I think Jeremy and, Joe or somebody else, maybe just, I don't know, but there's a bunch of my friends behind me. And I'm like, I literally loaded 3 magazines into my gun. And as soon as I pressed the trigger, the magazine fell out. I learned a huge lesson in that failure.
I like to test my anytime I do something to my gun, I'll take it out, shoot a match, and inevitably that's when hey idiot, you put the screws on my Holosun. I reversed the screws. One of them's longer than the other one. I was having cycle issues, and I'm like, man. And of course I'm out there, and the old 1911 boomers are like, see, your fancy red dot gun's failing. I said,
2 world wars.
There's always something about matches and classes where stuff will fail there and it never fails anywhere else,
In the Tom Givens course that I took a couple years ago, I was shooting the Glock 48 with the 507 on it, and I ran the shield arms mags, because that's, I like to get out there and test it. And everybody's naysayers about the mags. And, it ran that 3-day course in Casa Grande, getting dropped in dirt and gravel and sand. So the mags worked fine. The only issue that I had with my gun wasn't an issue of the gun or the dot. It was that the dot got washed out. And it's the first time that it happened to me. And AJ Zito, he's like, yeah, that's why, that's part of the reason you go out and take the course. Because when it happened, he called it a novelty moment, right? When it happened, I was like, I forgot how to use my iron sights. I forgot that, hey, and I was shooting the casino drill, or the casino drill. And
I pull this number, like,
I just sat there. And I was looking through the window, and I was like, and I remember telling myself, you see your irons are lined up, press the trigger. And then another guy, he was like, yeah, he's like, your dot washed out probably. And I'm like, that's exactly what it was. It wasn't the 507. It was a Shield RMSC. It was that optic, I believe, or it might've been the 507. I don't know. That's besides the point. I want to talk to, you had mentioned standards and passing. What are the standards for a student to pass the Beyond the Pistol course Let's go the beyond the permit 4 and then mastering the pistol course. What are the standards that you're looking for your students to be able to execute at the end of those courses to receive the certificate?
Yeah. So we got together, and the question was, actually, it just really kind of fell in our lap. You know, it really fell in our lap. The like, if I had to ask just about any instructor that had trained with Tom or with Tim or with Gabe or anybody else, right? If you had to certify folks and you were king for a day and you could wave a magic wand or whatever, what would you want your average concealed carrier to be able to do with a handgun? And everybody has their answer: bill drill, tooler drill, whatever have you, right? Tooler drill isn't even a drill, but it's neither here nor there. What we like is the FBI qualification because it's court defensible and it's nationally recognized. It's ran the same way in Alabama as it is in California, and it sounds really great in court. Super court defensible. Like, okay, Mr. Beech, how do we know you're proficient with this handgun? Oh, well, I regularly put myself through the same course of fire that the FBI puts their agent through. 2 weeks ago, I scored a 98%. And that's so simple for a lawyer to be able to understand. Mm-hmm. Even if they don't know anything else about guns, that still sounds very impressive. You and I know that the FBI pistol qual, it can be pretty easy, but you and I know that, okay? So that's really the qualification for beyond the permit 4. Now, mastering the pistol is a little bit spicier. We wanted to test several applications within a single drill. We want the round count to stay low, but we want there to be a high bar to reach that'll push folks, not just your breakout students, but even us as instructors. There's a leaderboard among us, and at the top of that leaderboard, there's Will Dugan. There's Jay Mungle. I think he's number 2 on that leaderboard, and it makes sense because he has a turbo pen. I have a light pen. I'm going to be going for my turbo pen here in October, and I'm 3rd on that leaderboard. But no, wait, I'm 5th. I'm 5th now. Yeah, because Ty and Adam, they got up there, and that's good stuff. Now, the final exam for the mastering the pistol is, and you only get 3 tries. You got to do it individually. Your time gets recorded. You're only allowed 1 miss, and that 1 miss will add a point to your time. It'll add 1 second to your time. If you're familiar with the ILFEQ target, it's basically the same targets that Tom Gibbons uses in a lot of his classes. It's got an 8-inch circle in the body. It's got a 4-inch circle in the head, and then over in the corner, there's a little circle. We call it a parrot. And the drill is that you have to shoot from the holster, from concealment. You have to shoot 4 rounds in the body, 3 rounds in the head, and 2 rounds in the parrot. The target is situated at 10 feet, and you have 10 seconds to do it.
Well, that should be no problem.
It should be no problem. It's a huge problem for a lot of people, and you'll be surprised how often people feel it. So,
I mean, Andy ran me through a drill the last time he and I were on the range, and it was a trick drill, if you will, and it was on a timer. And he was like, "You have 5 seconds to do whatever the drill was." And we'd come out, shoot the drill, and then we'd sit there, and it would seem like an eternity. And then all of a sudden, you'd hear beep, and your 5 seconds is over. But I already finished the course of fire 3 seconds earlier because I was going fast.
Yeah.
So you remember that, Andy, that drill that you put me through in that class that we were doing together?
Yeah, that's actually a Tim Herron drill, and he starts his course with that. I was looking through it to see if he had anything on the beginning. So this is, by the way, we always promote Tim a lot because he does good stuff for us. This is Tim's instructor
I love Tim. He's awesome.
Performance. But this is his target here. And so he just basically used a 2-inch dot torture, and he made rectangles. And he starts it off as give me 5 rounds. in the first rectangle at your own pace, no time limit. Give me the 5 best rounds of your life. And you kind of go through that. And it's like, okay, now give me 5 rounds in 5 seconds. And then automatically everybody's wang, 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 right away. And then 3 more seconds later goes off and beep. And it's like, dude, you had 5 seconds. You could have really, it's learning your own time versus throttle control. And one thing that Tim talks about so much is how humans were so bad at timekeeping, right? What do we have? We have time. We have watches on our arms, watches on our computer, watches on our microwave, watches in our car, watches on our stereo in the car, air clocks, whatever. And we just suck at time. And that's exactly what I ran Judson through, is that same thing, is starting to learn kind of your own time versus throttle control of even just a simple dot torture test.
Agreed.
Memphis, you said it was 10 rounds from end of the parrot into the circle on the QR.
2 rounds. So the
2
whole
rounds.
drill altogether is 9 rounds. You got 4 in the body, 3 in the head, and then 2 in the little parrot. And it's 9 rounds. You have 10 seconds to do it. But what pushes us is the leaderboard, because I want to move up the leaderboard. So my goal right now, and also we have personal goals as well. Like, for instance, right now, cold, I'm averaging that drill in like 3.2, 3.3.
Wow.
And when I'm warmed up, I can get down to like 3.1, like the 3.10s, 3.20s. My goal is to get down from concealment.
That's pretty impressive.
Spicy.
Man.
That's pretty spicy, yeah.
I'd take that any day.
So
Spicy
get this.
What's his name?
Our director of training, Will Dugan, he's able to do it from his 3 o'clock holster, right? He carries a 3 o'clock, and he's able to do that from concealment from an open front garment. And he's able to get that. His best time was 2:78.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's
I can't even
crushing
pull the trigger that fast.
Yeah, he's utterly crushing it. And I'm like, dude, what have you done? Like, what sights do you have? He has Dave Savigny sights. He has a stock Glock that he's been running since, I think it's a Gen 4. And he only got the Gen 4 because, he couldn't find any Gen 3s anymore. And now the next gun he gets will probably be a Gen 5 because he can't find any Gen 4s. So
the Gen 5 or the Gen 6 will be the Gen 3 just rebranded, right? That's what they do.
Yeah,
they're taking away or they're putting the finger grooves back on.
Yeah, I think so. My theory is, if you JB weld like 2 Gen 3s together, it'll make the Gen 6.
Yeah.
So, be twin linked,
Yeah.
Not wrong.
Oh, man. All right. Well, I think, we can carry this conversation out for another hour or so, but I don't want to take up everybody's evening up too much more than we already have. Before we get off though, Memphis, I want you to recommend, tell me the worst instructor you've ever trained with. No, I'm just playing. We won't.
Oh, wow.
No,
Can I go?
Yeah. Who are some, who are a couple other instructors that are students or that are viewers and that you would recommend to your students to go out and train with outside of the Top Gun instructor cadre?
I can only speak to who I've trained with, just from personal experience. And what I'll do is I kind of link this into, there's really 3 goals that I have personally, and those are the only 3 that I could really speak to. I'm not too much of a hunter. I'm not too much of a long distance guy, but the 3 goals that I have are to be a good defender. And the best guys that I could direct people to are, the best guys I could recommend right now are Tom Givens. And I got to throw a plug out there to my director of training, Will Dugan. 2 peas in a pod right there. As a matter of fact, if I could toss a couple more out there just for defensive purposes, I would say that guys like John Hearn and John Murphy are doing some really special stuff in this space right now, because it's not just about pressing triggers and, draw the first shot and split times. It's more about, being more cognitive about, about your gunfire, being more responsible about your decisions. And that's really where their curriculum really lines into. Another goal I have is to be a good instructor. And there's really no better place you can go than Tom Givens. He's absolutely solid. And also, let's see, Who else can you train with in order to be a really good instructor? I'm gonna toss two more names in the hat: Akil Kadir and Tiffany Johnson, especially if you're gonna do gateway instruction, because they end up adding a lot of extra value to. I think they even started their gateway instructor course, and that stuff is really solid. I'm gonna toss one more name into the hat. You may have heard of him. His name's John Correa of Active Self Protection. I went up to visit him earlier this year, and you know, all I knew from him at first was what you see on Facebook and YouTube, but the dude has some super deep wells of empathy. Like, I think he was a pastor for 14 years, and he's he's probably gone to every gun school you could possibly think of, and he's pulled away the best parts of that and made that into his own instructor curriculum. And he surrounds himself with superb people, like Chris Beam. Let's see, Carrie Dudenhofer is excellent, absolutely excellent. Stephanie and Neil Whitener are a 1-2 punch, and they're solid. So, it's a little intensive because basically it's a master's degree program. It's a master's degree semester in adult learning. So it's a lot. You're going to read like 5 or 6 books. You're going to go up to, Sioux Falls and get like 3 days of instruction. Is pretty solid. Now, if you want to be a good competitor, Tim Herron you're absolutely barking up the absolute right tree.
Absolutely.
There's really probably no one better besides, like I haven't trained with, the likes of Steve Anderson or, Ben Steger, but Tim is absolutely solid. And then also, if you just want to get better at pressing triggers, Gabe White has a lot of really, really good instruction to give out there. And, he does superb. Like, he has revolutionized the way I practice. And it shows dividends. It gives real big dividends. And so that's really, I know it sounds like a lot of people, but those are the names that come to mind right now.
It's good company, man. I mean, I recognized almost all of the names you read off. So I mean, they're definitely a good company.
When I got into shooting, go ahead, Andy.
The best thing I would say, he just rattled off quite a few great instructors, and I had the ability to train with quite a few of those. Just go to TACCon, Tom Givens TACCon, and that's the first time I met Memphis. Gabe White, Carl Wren, Greg Ellifritz, met Tiffany for the first time there. Keel shot with me, and I think it was Wayne Dobbs, one of his 4-hour blocks. And I was watching Akil shoot, and I was like, okay, that dude's he's on the right track.
He's legit.
He's legit. So, man, I tell you, if all those instructors, just about all those instructors, you could go to TACCon. Now, that said, you better get your ticket and get it quick because that thing sells in like -2 seconds. But go to TACCon, man, and you'll get a taste of all of those guys. Gabe White was just like kind of like a scientist, man. He just kind of blew me away on how he talks and how he teaches. But yeah, TACCon's where it's at.
Yeah, I'll get back to that in a second.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when I got into firearms and I started taking it seriously, the list of instructors that I wanted to train with was like a mile long, and then I got real narrow real quick once I started realizing what I didn't know, and started recognizing the marketing hype and the stuff like, there's just we've had a couple of those instructors on where after talking with them, I'm like, yeah, I'm glad I crossed you off my list. And now the more that I've delved into it, the more that list is starting to grow, but I'm not replacing like some of the national instructors that used to be on that list that, don't teach their students how to use their sights or anything, or they don't have accuracy standards because, you still heard them kind of stuff. But a lot of these folks that are up and coming, and just hearing the instructors that we've talked to and their students, how their students interact on social media and in their videos and stuff, you can kind of just see that the people they're training with get it, right? And they're holding their students to a standard of accountability. And they have that right mindset when it comes to training, and what it is that whether it's competitive shooting or defensive shooting or whatever it is. So it's starting to grow, and it's a lot of those folks. I've had the pleasure to train with Tim and Tom. I want to train with Akil and Tiffany, Gabe White. I want to get to his class hopefully in the next year or two. And then TACCon. When is TACCon? April?
March, late March.
And
yeah.
They already sold out for this one?
Yeah, it's sold out in 3 days. Yeah. But tell you what, like there's a lot of folks where, they only have so much time and so much money to train. Mm-hmm. And they knock out like the whole year's worth of training right there in TACCon because it's 3 days, 8 hours each. And just to give you an idea of, like what your TACCon can look like. I mean, I helped out for the majority of it because I'm an RSO there, and I still was able to get, to get a seat with, what was it? I took modules as a student with John Holshin, with Carl Wren, with John Farnham, with Greg Ellifritz, with John Hearn, with Tom Givens, with there was a bunch of other stuff. We shot a pistol match. Everybody did great. What else? I was RSO for Tatiana Whitlock, which is one of the most professional instructors in the entire industry, and just so happens to be a lady. And so, I mean, I'm talking, she is rock solid. So, I mean, it's just the folks that, and then just hanging out with folks, like we're in the lobby of the hotel drinking back beers with, like Tim Herron and, Tim Chandler and Ashton Ray were on my left, and, like Warren Wilson to my right. And, I think Tim Reedy was there too. I mean, dadgum, and it's weird because I don't know, it's not really like a celebrity culture or anything like that. It's not really like trying to get starstruck or trying to, further my own profile. But what happens is these folks, they have stories, and mm-hmm. they have experiences. Tim Herring could be a truck driver, and I'd still want to drink a beer with him.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Like it doesn't matter that he used to, and that's one thing that's kind of interesting. Drive rally trucks, dude. We talked about dude, how are you able to raise your kids? Like it's just pretty awesome, and just being able to hear like how they juggle this thing that we do with, real life, like asking Gabe, like, hey, how is it you're able to live in Washington, or Portland? Like, how are you able to live up there, with the culture that they have? Like, asking Tom, like, hey, like, how do you deal with all the travel, like you're able to coordinate all these different events. Getting up with John Hearn, he has rotating targets. This man has targets that run on a pneumatic system and it rotates, right? And so he's able to turn these targets, and it's like, how do you pack all that stuff up into your truck? How did you make this stuff? He has this remote control, and it looks like the machine that catches ghosts on Ghostbusters.
You're talking to Jeremy right now.
I have I've put together a training system, and it's the patent is in process right now. And it's a light system. I'll grab one here in a minute if I can reach it.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
no, it'll be good because it'll hopefully reinvigorate me to get into working out some of it, right? So this is one of the prototype units. But what you do is you set up, you can have 9, 10, 15 of these of them out there, whatever. You set them on there, and then on the back side it has a vibration sensor, right? So, and what it does from the app, you can link them together, right? So from an instructor standpoint, if the 4 of us out there on the range, each one of us has a group of 3 or 4 targets. I tell the system which targets are in which group. It will randomly select a light unit from each one of those groups, and it will require a random number of hits. Once it detects that random number of hits, say it randomly chooses 3 hits. Once that target chooses or detects 3 hits, it will randomly select another target from that group, from each student's group. You can designate one of them as a no-shoot target. So if you say, hey, target number 3 is a no-shoot, if it detects a hit on that one, it'll light up red, letting the instructor know that that student shot somebody that they shouldn't have. Or you can have one of them line up, or you can have 10 students on the line. Each one of them have a unit in front of them, and it will light up for a random number of hits. Basically, it eliminates the preconceived, right? Like if I go up there and I'm shooting a drill, it's all right, it's going to be 3 rounds fired at 8 yards into the 8-inch circle. I know that's my target. I know how many times I have to pull the trigger. So I'm already ahead of the curve a little bit. Not that there's any negative training from that. I just think it's the randomness of it creates an added level of decision making and thought processing that goes into it. So hopefully I can have that fleshed out and worked out a little bit more. Just waiting on the patent to come back. And say that was my COVID project. I worked on that for a couple of years, and I've been kicking around in my head. I think I first talked to Andy about it like 6 years ago, 7 years ago.
I mean, you've been working on this thing since way before.
Yeah, COVID. I do have I did put together an app recently.
I was gonna say, hold on, don't say nothing.
Oh. Don't say anything about the app.
Oh, go ahead. No, that segment was brought to you by our new sponsor, Atriarch Training Systems.
Yeah, Atriarch
Jeremy, you want to talk about our new sponsor, Atriarch Training
Systems? Let me see if I. So not to toot my own here a ton.
That's awesome.
But I haven't talked about this in a while because I haven't seen Andy. Right, but I have this. It's like a shot timer app, but what it is. It's a command target companion app, and what you'll do is you go through there and you'll choose the colors and the numbers that you want for it to randomly choose, and then it will. Let me see if I can play here.
Square, blue, 8, move, yellow.
So that one is, I had it set up to where it'll give you several commands per iteration.
When that comes out, yeah,
I'll send you a link to that one. So you heard the move, right? It gave the move command, right? So you can use your phone's accelerometer in there, so to detect when you start moving and when you stop before it gives another random command. Or you can set up, a half a second where it'll give you the move command, and then a half a second later, it'll give you another random command. But it's basically you can use the casino drill target. I print up my own targets, with different colors and shapes and numbers. And then it'll randomly call out one of those shapes or the numbers, present it from holster. You set a par time. You can set a split time in there. So if you want to work on, quarter second splits or whatever. I think it's pretty cool. I put a bunch. I put a bunch of money into an app that, a user of one. I'll send you a link over to it. Are you iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
iPhone. Cool.
Yeah.
It'll work. I'm the same. It'll work on both. I prefer iPhone.
I prefer adult phones. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I think I, derailed it enough with my mad. I don't know. I don't want to say my mad scientist brain. Before we wrap up, let's go through final thoughts, piece of advice. Justin, let's start with you. What do you have to wrap it up for our listeners?
Let's get back in the game. I think that's kind of my takeaway from tonight is, we've been through COVID. We've been through Biden for a year and a half, whatever months. We're coming up on midterms. It should be a good political year for us gun owners, hopefully. And my takeaway is let's get back in the saddle. Let's put COVID behind us. Let's get back in the classroom, and let's go out and vote in November so that we can. We've got possibly one more Supreme Court seat that we could take, and if we do, it kind of solidifies, our way of life throughout at least our lifetime. You know what I mean? So get out and train, get out and vote.
What do you got, Andy?
I couldn't have said it any better. Get off your butts and vote. I can't tell you how many times you're on Facebook and we're in these gun forums and stuff, and it just drives me insane when people just kind of say, it's not going to change. It don't matter anyway. Well, I can guarantee you 100% you're right. It's not going to change, and it doesn't matter if you don't at least try to get your butt out there and vote. So I agree with that. Glad to see you, Jeremy. Obviously, I see you pretty often. Judson, it was good seeing you. Memphis, I really appreciate you coming on, and you're kind of like our welcome back guest after a pretty big hiatus. So you're kind of a big deal right now. I'm just saying.
I like it.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
No, it was awesome. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Sure, I'll offer a final thought. Let's make good decisions. Okay, let's make the type of decisions where if we look back on them 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we're still proud of them.
That's a good one.
I love it.
I tell my students every time they leave my school, make sure you make good choices. Walking down the street, walking down to the market to get a Coca-Cola or whatever, make good choices.
Yeah, I don't have anything profound other than I appreciate you guys. This was an awesome first episode. Back. Hopefully we will see everybody back here next week. Memphis, we'd love to have you back on anytime. Hopefully I'll be able to catch you up at TACCon. Doesn't sound like it'll happen this year because I completely missed the registration. But 2024 already?
2024, usually those tickets go on sale just after everybody gets back from TACCon. So expect that to show up like April sometime, like early to mid-April.
I guess that does segue into my parting thoughts is there are a lot of great instructors that are aging out of instructing and teaching and training. Hopefully we'll see them retire, but we've lost quite a few instructors that are no longer with us.
Jaeger.
This year in the last couple years.
Ed Head from Gunsight, he just passed away.
Yeah. So, the time is a finite thing. If there's somebody that you want to train with, get out there and train with them sooner than later. Figure the money stuff out, figure the time stuff out. But a lot of these folks, I don't think anybody would have, a year ago, if you would have told me that James Jaeger was not going to be with us, he wasn't going to be teaching.
I know, right? Within
12 months, I would have said, you're full of shit. That guy's going to go. He's going to be doing this longer than Gibbons, So get out there and train, folks. And remember, it's your life. It's your safety and protection. It's your responsibility. Stay safe, guys. It's great having you on.
I love it. See you guys.